Aries, Ashe. Obatula, Ashe. Nila Hotep, Ashe. Anu, Ashe. Ptah, Ashe. Apollo, Ashe. Da, Ashe. Zaka, Ashe. Shango, Ashe. Makali, Ashe.
Station looks like. But it's grown that way, I would say, over 30 years, and people have listened, people are seeing the results, and that's pretty much it. Okay, where to begin? I can't do this as a formal lecture, it's just too intimate. There's not enough people here to make it seem too formal. I can't really think formally when it's a group this small. But I will simply say to you that the title of the presentation is The Sickening Before the Quickening. And let me explain that title to you. The sickening is what I feel is happening to almost everything that we are doing now. That's the water that we drink, that's the air we breathe, that's the food that we eat, are all sickening. Now you say, don't say that about your food because you just finished this Friday, Saturday. Yesterday you had some good fish, and today you may have had some good stew and these kind of things too. You have to be so careful nowadays as to what you do eat, and some of the times the things that you feel you're eating that are supposed to do one thing are really not, they're doing something else. I'll get this out of here too, and some things I can see. The air, for instance, has all kind of petrohydrocarbons. What are petrohydrocarbons? They are carbons, which means that they are things that have been left up after the good things have been taken out. Petrol, of course, which is what we put into our cars, petroleum, distillates, gasoline, anything along this line. Sometimes Vaseline that you buy in the stores is petroleum distillate. Once the good life force in that thing has been burned up or used up, you have then the empty shell that was there, what carried it, and that becomes a carbon, a dark mass of residue, if you would. And when that's leaked into the air through exhaust of cars, through airplanes, every time a plane takes off there from one of the major airports, and you understand that there are some 150 different airports in the United States, major ones with about 500 different minor ones. Every time one of those jets takes off, it does a polluting factor that a car would take a week to do if you drove it constantly. And that's with a 4 to 8 cylinder car. Every time one takes off. And that just spews it through the air. If they go up 35,000 feet, they're spewing 35,000 feet petrohydrocarbons. The exhaust from cars, they're telling you that aerosol sprays, of course, is caused the ozone layer to rupture. And they have a hole at the pole where ultraviolet light is now streaming in, cascading down on everybody, causing cancers or potential cancers, tumors or potential tumors, hair loss again, what they call neuritis, neuralgia, all type of things where the person is dyslexic, they can't think and the nerves can't work in order. These things are partially true, but in addition to which there's strontium-90 from all the atomic tests, and if you remember recently, France, roughly 15 years ago, and France 20 years ago, at Bikini Atoll just made all kind of explosions of testing devices of nuclear radiation. Recently, Turkey and Afghanistan and India have entered into atomic testing. The United States does it all the time. They just don't report it. They're part of this non-nuclear proliferation track, but they don't seem to understand it. They test in Nevada, they test in Utah, they test again in the oceans, and they don't report it, because they're a Class A1 world power, which simply means they've gotten this planet divided into Class 1, Class 2, Class 3. Class 3, of course, is supposed to be Africa and countries that are now considered third world. Class 2 are emerging countries such as Arabia, India, and so on like that. And Class 1 supposed is any European country, which they feel in scientific research is way ahead of everybody else, sets the stage and everybody else follows. They're messing up the air. And if you go, and some of you may have experienced this, how many of you do a little traveling in a car or a bus and you come to a major city off of a highway? How many of you have ever done this recently where you can still see it in your own mind? Let me just raise your hand if you will. Come in off a highway, you come into a city. Okay. Those of you that have you ever noticed a little haze that sits over the city? And especially if it's a bright day or so, nowadays you get such solemn days that I hate to see the winters come. Not that I don't like the cold weather, but I don't like the pollution and the grayness. It's always, there's very little sunshine that gets through all these polluted clouds. Well, the whole point is, that's a petrohydrocarbon, or a distillate type shield that's over there, and you're driving into it, which means once you get into it, it doesn't disappear, you just don't see it. But you're now breathing that haze that set over that city, that pall that set over that town. You're breathing that. You're breathing it on a daily basis. Think now that they say the heart beats roughly at about 30 to 45 beats per minute, and that if your expirate, you'll get a really hyper or something like this, it might go even faster. And each time your blood is taking in that same poisons, throwing off the poisons from your own carbon dioxide, and you're trying to live. The body cannot live without air. I made this statement many times ago. You can go, roughly they say, 3 minutes without air. You can go 3 days, 3.5 without water. You can go 21 days without food. So you can see the importance of each thing. And yet, here we're breathing in these urban pollution factories, things that are not giving us pure oxygen, but giving us all kind of byproducts. That will affect you. Everything that you do will be affected. Not only is the air so much polluted, but the water is messed up and polluted. I won't even ask that terrible question, how many of you drink tap water? But if you do, I wish you'd stop, because I like you because you're here. Now, if you are drinking tap water, you need to check with any of your city's filtration plants, or if you're in a suburb or so like that, just check the water purification tables there. Check to see what the EPA standards, environmental protection standards are for the water, and begin to see what your city is actually doing with the water. In most cases, most major cities in the United States, the water is completely filthy and polluted. Completely filthy and polluted. Let me explain to you already, Detroit falls in that gamut. I'll save you the trouble for doing it. Trust me. The water, in many cases, has up to 39, sometimes I think in Pennsylvania, and one other place I forget, even 42 different chemicals in it. These are chemicals that may not be in there just because of the air, the things that fall out from it, but the city adds it to it to kill off bacteria and germs. They add it to kill off bacteria and germs because every time they add one, and they use it for a little time, the bacteria mutate. They actually change structure and adapt to the chemical that's there to kill them. First generation goes quickly. Second generation becomes somewhat tolerant. Third, very tolerant, and even begins to enjoy eating the thing that was taken there before, and they multiply for it. They mutate. Now, they found out the mutability of germs into what they call viruses and all other kind of things. They found this out the turn of the century. This is now almost ready to turn another century. The millennium is coming. That's going to mean a lot. We could stay here all night long just talking about Y2K and things. So that means they had 100 years to realize that through the test, giving chemicals to a bacterium, in most cases, the intelligence of the bacterium will not let itself die off, it will mutate. This is a very unicelled, multicelled organism that starts off with unicell, easily mutates to it. So it is now usually up to 39, 40 different chemicals they put in to kill the bacteria, and as long as they use it for 30 days or less, the bacteria is going to mutate. So who really knows how many chemicals are put in there again? What's interesting about all of that, just an ozonating process could eliminate the need for the chemicals. If they would put pure ozone into the water, pure oxygen, in other words, into the water, and that's a long term we could get into too if you choose, we can tonight. But just putting that in there, bacteria, especially those that are harmful and detrimental to the human system, don't like light, don't like oxygen, and don't like any kind of food with enzymatic or what I call God force, life force in it. They want dead, putrid, desolate, non-moving, non-aerating type of things to ingest. So that's all they have to really do. Just putting in ozone or oxygen into the city water supply. Now, knowing this, and if you think I'm kind of way out where I am, But if you think that I'm way out without study and feasibility, no, I am not. I have done study to prove this. If I know this, and let's say I'm a layperson, not supposed to be in the government for water purification or reclaiming tables, then why hasn't somebody told them about this? Well, they have. And they refuse to do it. Why? The only reason I can see they refuse to do it is that they get good money from chemical companies to produce the chemicals and sell to them in packages. And that supportive index is what keeps this, one of the things that keeps big cities going. Now, to think that they want people to be sick and they don't care about the people, we know that can't be the truth because that's the government, right? So we know it must be the other thing, right? Well, right, you know, the government that you elect, select, and neglect, and then seems to also seems to miss the point sometimes, would not do that to you, would they? Or would they? There is something called wisteria, red plague. How many have heard about it before? Well, a lot of times you already know all about it. The red plague, wisteria. Wisteria. Wisteria, the red plague, is something that is now in most of the major waters around the shores of the United States. Roughly around the first of this year, and it's almost the first of next year now, they found it up in the North Sea. They're finding it again in most of the major oceans and in fresh as well as salt water areas, ponds, lakes, rivers, oceans. Wisteria is immutable, which means it can change form. We use that word a lot tonight. Bacterium, which is usually found at the bottom of the waters, so they say. And for some strange reason, quote unquote, it is chosen to surface at this time, and it mutates. What starts off as a plant form, which also attaches to fish and eats them just like a cancer would eat, causing the fish to try to get out of the water, causing the fish to begin to bleed in the water, causing other predators and fish to attack them, and causing a chain reaction that is quite a mess. But it started when they first detected it, probably around North Carolina. And long about 3 years ago, they were warned by a lot of ecologists that watched this type of a breeding thing, that took samples of it to the laboratory to study, that this thing was becoming like a plague. It was attached to fish that people were eating, and of course what they do is they scrape it off, as though you can scrape off a wound and it has nothing to do with the bloodline of that fish. But being a cold vertebrate, they say, well, maybe we can isolate that. So they scraped it for a while. They found other fish that ate those fish contracted the same thing, and they began to be eaten up from the inside out. It began to, of course, attack other plant life, since it was a plant, and it was so vicious that it would eat the plant's roots, and so the plant would float to the top, forming a scum and a bacteria, and stench would begin to come up. It was almost like a living cancer, now rampant in the waters. All that was fine until they found that they woke up one day, or they began to use their brains and observe something one day, and they found all on the piers and the wharfs and things around the Carolinas and stuff was this kind of a reddish fungus, this wisteria type of a plant. It was growing now. It had come out of the water and could actually take air as well as water. And then, lo and behold, within 90 days' time, they found the daggone thing walking on the beach. It not only had mutated this form from a plant, it was becoming an animal, a mobile type animal that could actually move, and then later on they found it sprouted wings and could fly. You tell me what that thing is, was, or will be. Plant to animal to bird. Well, I'm saying bird because it's not really a bird, but you see what I'm saying? The thing was found everywhere. It attacked everything that it could. People also. And then they found it in the Gulf of Mexico. Of course, it's very hard to understand how anything pollutant or vicious could be in the Gulf of Mexico, since they've been dumping, the byproduct of aluminum chlorhydride, and aluminum into the old Gulf of Mexico now since 1933. That's what they did with the aluminum byproduct. The aluminum industry was told by Franklin Delano Roosevelt to cease and desist, to find something to do with their byproduct or stop making aluminum. Well, they found something to do with it. They made aluminum fluoride and put it in your toothpaste, and they dumped the rest of it to the Gulf of Mexico, killing the fish there. And when it began to come up and make a big stench there in the Gulf, they said, well, it must have been something they couldn't understand, organism from outer space. They couldn't understand that aluminum, which is a very toxic type thing, was killing off the fish, killing off the plant and everything else. So it could have even spread there and then gone under tunnels or gone under the water, who knows. But it was all found in the Gulf. It's gone around into Texas now. It's gone around now to the California coast. It's now gone up in the North Sea, and now they stop talking about it because they don't know where it's not. It's very deadly, very vicious, spreadable, mutable, and it seems to change phylum from fish to animals to people to plants whenever it likes. Just a nice little thought I thought I'd give you as you felt very comfortable here. Again, wondering again what it could do in the water. What can we do with the food that they have now? The food. Well, we know that since most people on Earth are meat eaters, well, I won't say most, a lot of people are meat eaters, especially in the 30s up to now, they eat some form of meat. And of course, meat eating, it either means fish or bird or fowl or cattle or something. It crawls, some people eat insects, and you've heard some of the things, they even eat fish roll and eggs for caviar, things like this. Well, you know what happens if the fish are with Listeria germs. But add to that desotebestrol. Desotebestrol, called DES, is injected into cattle and most vertebrates to anesthetize them and then to cause the flesh to begin to fall off the bones. Instead of a hard protein type flesh, they put the desotebestrol in there, and it causes the fish to, I'm sorry, it's not fish we're talking about, but cattle, the flesh to hang off of them. This makes the flesh much softer so that when you eat it, it's much tender when you have your steaks and chops and things like this, and it's not so hard. If it was a hard protein, it would not be soft meat, you break your teeth off or begin to chew like mad, and it wouldn't be very tasty, especially if you're a connoisseur of steaks and chops and barbecue, things along this line. Not only do they have the desotebestrol, but there are pesticides that are found in the grazing land for many animals, especially for hoofed ones. The pesticides are in the grass, the pesticides are in the wheat, the pesticides are in most of the things that they eat as they graze. In addition, of course, to all the stuff that falls when it rains, we already talked about that in the water, in the air, the pesticides, the strontium-90. By the way, do you remember Chernobyl? How many of you, Chernobyl rings a bell? Chernobyl was, of course, over in Russia, that they had a complete meltdown of an atomic reactor. That's what it was. Don't let them fool you. Complete meltdown of an atomic reactor. That thing polluted stuff 5 miles down into the earth. And they don't know where it went because there are underground streams under the earth. Springs and natural artesian wells and this kind of thing. But when they had this pollution going on there, they also found that the air was poisoned by the Chernobyl cloud that went up, as well as the water, and as well, of course, as the animal and carcasses. Well, they dumped a lot of the radioactive ice at Chernobyl into areas around Africa, a few parts around Italy, and off the coast of the United States, with the United States recognizing that they did this. There's a booklet, a manual, if you really want to get sick, well, I'm sorry, if you really have nothing else to do one day, and you want, instead of watching a horror story, you want to read a horror story, go to the library and ask for the Manual of the International Trade in Waste, or go to your favorite Crocs and Brentano's, or wherever you would, and get a volume of the International Trade in Waste and get sick. The International Trade in Waste tells you everything that is traded. They actually buy this stuff and they bid for it, contracts for it, for polluted things and things that are so messed up that they don't know what to do with. So they trade with it, dump it on some unsuspecting country or unsuspecting ocean, or unsuspecting lake, or unsuspecting landfill, or wherever else they can dump it. They get rid of the waste. And they're paid good money because some of it is highly toxic. Some of it is very, as I say, very vicious. And they trade this back and forth. That's what is called fumigation. Fumigation, by which they take the actual seed of something, and to stop supposedly pests and insects and mites from attacking it, they actually soak the seed in very harsh chemicals to repel that one, and then they give a shot of some kind of a biotic to the plant seed itself so it'll still grow, and it grows bigger than it used to be, but it has one thing missing: it has no life force. Think of life